All right, everybody, welcome back to the shop. Today's project, we're going to build a router circle jig. In a upcoming project, I'm going to need the circle jig to cut some holes for a steady rest for my wood lathe, and figured I'd just kind of spend the time making a nice, permanent, and dedicated jig for my palm router. So I've got the router here. I've taken the plate off the bottom, and I'm going to use that to lay out the hole pattern on the circle jig. We've got a hole saw, countersink. We're going to need a few other drill bits and taps and dies and things, but I'll pull those out later. I've got a chunk of brass. I'd like to use this for the T-nut that'll slide underneath the track here and allow us to move the center point of the circle jig back and forth. I've got some aluminum round bar. I'm going to turn some knobs on the lathe and probably knurl the outside, and those are going to be the clamp knobs. Once you set your center distance, you'll clamp it down with those. I just did a little planning of the kind of cross-sectional view of how I want the track to work here. Nothing to scale. Obviously, it's all hand-drawn and just kind of kicking around in my head, so I drew it up in what I'm calling Sharpie CAD. Could have done this on the computer. I just was up for more of a kind of manual project and hand build this thing. I think that's all we really need. I'm going to get going by starting to route the slot in the piece of plexiglass that I'm going to use for the circle template. So yeah, I'm going to clear some of this stuff out of the way and set up a fence and get going on the routing here. So I've got the acrylic cut to the exact width of the base plate on the palm router. That's just going to help with the kind of math and centering of the groove that I'm going to route through this. I put a little bit of double-sided tape on the back, and I've got a fence ready to go here. That's a reasonably straight edge, and I've got the factory cut reference edge up against the fence, so I'm going to try to keep that as my reference edge throughout the project here. So next step, I'm going to just kind of figure out exactly where I want to go with this, get the battery in the router, and get a groove cut in here. Okay, well, the first attempt was pretty unsuccessful here. The acrylic is a lot harder than I had planned on, so it's definitely challenging the router a little. I added more double-sided tape to the back of this just to hold it a little bit better, and I'm going to add a second fence as well, so I've got something to go back and forth in between with the router. So it's always a little bit of a learning curve running a new tool, but it definitely worked great once I had a full powered 4 amp battery in it, but I did unfortunately break my end mill somewhere along the way there. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to route a slightly wider channel about halfway through the acrylic. And what that's going to do is serve as the T-track for our brass T-nut once that's put together. So got to go find a larger bit and get reset up here, and then we'll cut that dado. I switched to a 1/2 inch bit, just kind of tightened everything up and double checked here. Don't want to screw up again, but this is looking good. So I'm going to route that 1/2 inch channel about halfway through the acrylic, so about 1/8 of an inch deep. I might go a little bit deeper than that, but we'll start with 1/8 and see how that's looking. Okay, well, if you ignore this one, this one, this one, and this one, that went perfectly, and I nailed it on the first try. So, off camera, I went and I got this piece of brass cut to a 1/2 inch wide, and then marked in 1/8 inch from either side. I'm going to need to mill some shoulders in here on the milling machine so that it nests properly inside of the track here. So yeah, we'll jump over to the mill, do that cut real quick, and then come back here. Okay, I've got everything in the mill here. I'm sitting up on some parallels just so that I can make sure this is all nice and flat. I am milling this. I am not really doing any machining here. This is mostly by eye with some rough reference marks, but that is good enough for what we're doing today. Okay, let's go check our fit. Okay, I did a little bit more fiddling around with the mill and a file, but I've got this where it seats nice in the T-track, slides end to end okay. We're gonna need to tap a couple of holes in this, probably 832, and those are gonna be studs that stick up and go through this piece. We'll make our 2 aluminum knobs that'll clamp this down, and then there's going to be a center hole here, and basically that'll be the pivot point. Slides back and forth, router goes on the far end. But I think for right now we gotta make the knobs, so we'll get that aluminum turned, get it knurled, and then come back to this brass piece. So first step for making these knobs, I'm just going to knurl what's sticking out here, and then we won't have to come back and do that, and then we'll cut the knobs out of the knurled piece. Okay, well, the lathe didn't like that, but eventually I got it to work, and that feels and looks like a nice knurl there. All right, let's turn some knobs. So I just want the end to be about the size of a number 8 flat washer, and that is basically bang on there. So I'm going to part this one off, and then we'll make the next one. Yeah, I don't like the way that's working. We're gonna do this the easy way. All right, I cut this off with the hacksaw. Parting is just always a challenge on this little lathe. It's underpowered and I don't know what I'm doing, so I run into a lot of trouble with that. But this one is ready to go. I need to make one more and then we'll go back to working on the brass T-nut. Okay, well, I've got two knobs made. Just did most of that off camera. Somewhat of a pain in the butt with that little lathe. I need to mount two 832 screws through this brass T-nut now that are basically going to make up a sandwich. So we've got our brass bar, we'll have our two number 8s, we'll have our acrylic, and then we'll have the two knobs to tighten it down, and then a center hole here, and that'll basically make up our sliding adjustment for the jig. Okay, well, let's try assembling this and see if it works. So my T-nut's going to go in the bottom. And then I'll start the number 8 screw. Eventually I'll cut the heads off of these. So I don't want it to go all the way through. At some point I'll probably put some Loctite on that so that they stay flush with the back of the brass. Okay, and when I tighten that down, this doesn't go anywhere, so that's exactly what I want. I'll need to put a hole in the center here, but in terms of the track, that part is ready to go. All right, so that T-nut is ready. Just gonna let the Loctite dry on that. To get the router ready to mount on here, I've taken the existing plate and clamped it to our jig. I've got it squared up and lined up, and I've got a transfer punch that's just about the same size as the screw that came with the router. So let me make 4 marks here. Okay, those are pretty hard to see. They're not really going to show up on the camera, but before I drill them, well, I've got a nice fine point. I'm going to create an X here, and that's going to help me find the center for where I want the router to go through. So basically, I'm just connecting the 4 corners of the existing plate transferred onto the jig here. And then, not sure if we can see that, but X marks the spot. That's where I'm going to drill out a larger hole for the router bit. Been a couple of days for me, probably just a few seconds for you guys, but I did end up losing the footage where I drilled the mounting holes for the router and the hole for the bit to go through. but you know, pretty standard stuff. They're just countersunk holes that allow the screws that came with the router to fit below the surface so that this will turn as we need it to when we're cutting circles. I've got my whole T-track sliding assembly here, so the brass nut, the piece of plexiglass that's going to clamp to the surface, and a couple of nice knurled aluminum knobs. So in terms of all the pieces, this is basically ready to go, but there's a couple of style things I'd like to take care of. I want to taper this down away from the router, just make it look a little nicer and a few less corners to catch on things. Aside from that, I don't think there's a ton to do. I'm probably going to make this a little sleeker shaped as well. But yeah, let's get started by laying out the lines on here where I want to cut. I'm going to do that on the bandsaw. So I'll get this laid out and then I'll bring you guys over to the bandsaw and we'll do the cuts. All right, well, this is looking great. I do need to trim up the piece of plexiglass on the top of the T-track here, and we're gonna need to punch a hole through the center of this as well as our brass T-nut so that we've got a place to put a screw, a nail, a pin, you know, just something to go into the center of the circle when we go to cut it with the router. So I'm gonna go lop these corners off, do a little sanding on that, and then we'll get this drilled, and I think we'll be ready to put the router on and just kind of dry fit everything and give it a test. So I've shrunk this sled down here on the T-track a little bit so it's nice and tapered and doesn't get in the way anywhere on the track. I've got a center marked in this piece that I'm going to drill all the way through the brass T-nut as well, and I'm going to do that size for an 832 screw. I'm not sure if I want to keep that long term. I'm going to give it a shot. I might just go with a slightly bigger hole and be able to use a wood screw or a sheetrock screw, but for right now, let's give this a try and see how it goes. Okay, that's through the brass and the acrylic. So as I was tapping this for 832, I realized I probably don't want the acrylic to be tapped. I just want a clearance hole there, and then the screw can be threaded through the actual brass T-nut. So I grabbed a couple sizes bigger drill bit, and I'm just gonna enlarge the hole in the acrylic to be a clearance hole, and then let's get this thing put together. Got my T-nut. A piece of acrylic. Okay, and now depending on the type of cut we're trying to make, this screw is adjustable so it doesn't have to be full depth. I don't need to run a wood screw into whatever it is I'm cutting the circle out of. Fingers are a little cold for this today. Okay, this looks great. All those screws are in. None of them are sticking up above the plexiglass plate. So this, I think this is ready to go. I'm going to put a bit in here. I am going to find some wood, clear off my bench, and try cutting a circle out. And here goes nothing. So this did end up working. It did cut a circle, although it was not the cleanest circle. Just in thinking about it after the fact and looking back at the video, I had definitely plunged the router too deep and was asking a lot of a palm router. I think using this in practice, I will more than likely just make shallow passes until I'm all the way through, much like you do on a CNC machine. So there was a result. It wasn't a great result, but when we get to making our steady rest for the lathe, we can put this to use and try to get a better cut. All right, well, we did some test cuts. One went okay, one went not so okay. I do think my bit is maybe not the right one for the job here, so I'm going to try a couple of other options. Unfortunately, I broke the one that I think was my sharpest, and we'll need to go pick up another, but I love the way the router mounts on here. I really love the way the T-track and the slide turned out with the 832 screw for the center. All in all, I think the project went great. I'm excited to try it on something real, and I think the first project I have for it will be to make the steady rest for my wood lathe. So in a week or so here, we'll try that out. But for now, really appreciate you guys following along, and love making this project and love sharing, and thanks for watching.